for that. So next, I am so excited to introduce a good friend and colleague, co-collaborator, again, a member of the committee developing this. I would like to introduce actually two people. So first, I would like to introduce Kier Bradford Gray. And Kier is an attorney now in private practice, formerly the chief defender for the district attorney's office, and then is joined by Mike Lee, who is with the district attorney's office, right? So we're going to have a very, very, very interesting conversation between the two of them next. So without further ado, I would like to bring Kier to the podium and to the stage to have a conversation with Mike Lee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Atif, and thank you, Rep. Rab, for your wonderful comments that's fitting with the theme. And you're right, there's so many people that have been in the field, the man in the arena, that have not been spotlighted and highlighted for the work that they're doing. And so I'm hoping, and I'm so happy for the Transforming Justice Conference, Atif, Sister Catherine Nerney, Toral, everyone who was a part of this, for making sure that we shine a spotlight on the amazing work that is being done, that is not understood, and it needs to be supported. So Chris, for your sideline approach, let me tell you, sideliners can also help with funding and resources as well. And those are going to be amazing to help us continue to grow what has been started here in Philadelphia. I am so excited to get to talk with a friend that I have made my compulsory friend, and he has accepted that. Now, I'm like that sometimes. When I see great people of good character, I say to myself, he's going to be my friend. And so I said that when I met Mike Lee. He was one of the co-directors of Pulse when I met him, when I was a chief defender in Montgomery County. He was working on expungements, bringing that around the Commonwealth to help people with reentering back into society as best they could. Still, there's some issues, and we'll deal with those later. But Mike Lee is now the chief of staff for the district attorney's office. But prior to that, Mike Lee was my go-to person when it came to looking at different ways of administering justice, so that what we really got was public safety, and not demoralizing or making people more desperate by brandishing them with a lifetime conviction when it was not necessary. And so what I want to talk to Mike about, and the theme of this conference, is about community-based justice systems. And so this is what we've started here in Philadelphia. And I believe that many people thought that community always had a seat at the table and a voice, but it's not necessarily true. There's always, usually the people that have been most impacted for the justice system never get an opportunity to discuss what is important to them. What do they tolerate? What are they seeing? And why decision makers should really listen to them. So community-based justice systems, to me, reflect the inherent importance of communities as a part of the justice system process, as opposed to simply being subjected to it. So Mike, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed by me. I will not cross-examine you, because you have been tremendous. Before I just start, I want to thank what you're doing over there at the district attorney's office. I know you don't get thank yous a lot, because there's a narrative that is going around that is kind of casting a bad light on reform. And I will say this: if it's reform at its purest form is making sure that we advance our justice system practices so that public safety is accessible for all communities, just like Rep. Rab said. So Mike, just to begin, can you describe your role in looking at alternatives to the justice system's basic practices, and how did you see community play a major part in some of the initiatives that your office was trying to implement?
Well, thank you for having me here, and to all the other organizers, thank you for all your hard work and bringing such talent. And I'm really humbled to be part of this very important and ongoing conversation. And I think to answer your question first, from the personal perspective that I bring and the life experiences that I have, it's really important when we're thinking of transforming a system what do we want to accomplish by it? And when I did work around expungements and just met thousands of people across the Commonwealth, I really started to shift my understanding of I'm delivering a legal service to help people to I'm helping people do two things. One, demand something positive from the government, which many of the people that I met had never had that experience before. So going in for your expungement hearing, you're the petitioner and you're demanding something from the court instead of the court demanding something from you. And it was a very powerful process that took me a while for it to click as to just like how empowering that moment can be, and really focusing on how do I share that with the community so that we can activate more demands from our government. And that kind of approach led me down the path to joining the DA's office with my friend DA Krasner, and seeking out roles that allowed me to stay connected with what the community was doing, while also being influential internally and trying to change the DAO community or our culture. It's been very interesting because as a representative of the government, we don't take the approach that people in Harrisburg or in Washington, DC might take, where I represent just my constituents, or even more nefariously, just my voters. We have to represent everyone. So when we're coming up with policies and initiatives, we really have to think about the framing and the buy-in and participation from community and what they want to see accountability look like, how much it should cost, who should pay for it, and what are the long-term returns on those investments. And just like other transformative processes, introducing community voice and opinion has been a really rough process for us internally. Some people represent a very specific segment of our community. Some people have broad representation but narrow interest, like retailers, for example. And it can be really difficult to just not just hear the community voice, but balance the competing community voices as our resources are getting more and more limited due to budget constraints and pandemics and all these other things.
Mike, I'm glad you talked about that in terms of resources being limited, but also I've noticed that there's been a tough road to get the stakeholders to respect community voices and community opinions and community alternatives. However, what we did see when we were in a very big bind when COVID hit, we were looking for alternatives for our justice system practices, and the work that the community had been doing leading up to that was finally valued to the highest point. Could you talk about what you were able to do and what your office was able to utilize in connection with the Defender Association of Philadelphia when we were stuck with how do we make sure that our prisons are not going to bleed out of the seams, and do this in a way that public safety was at the utmost, but also respecting the fact that people could not and should not sit in jail for years because our courts were not open. We created something called pre-entry. And if you can talk about how we were able to work with your office to release about 2,000 people with no major spike in crime for those people who were released, I would love for you to discuss that.
Sure. And I think in large part to your leadership and just the effectiveness of organizing around criminal justice reform, as long as I've been a practicing attorney, just seeing that movement kind of mature, I think to your point, started to give, if not credibility, the inability to not listen to or welcome to the table community voices pushing us to do more and to be better. And I think with that, like wind under our wings, so to speak, it gave us a lot more confidence to try something new for us that also is evidence-based. And that's really like, how can those two things happen? In Philadelphia, it seems to happen all the time where we're introducing what feels like a revolutionary idea that other jurisdictions may have been doing for years and years and years very successfully. And I think under your leadership and DA Krasner and kind of the yin and yang and good cop, bad cop, we were able to successfully work together to balance those seemingly competing interests of either we have public safety or we have creativity in our criminal legal system. And by coming together to identify defender clients and then private represented clients who on paper may have seemed to pose a great risk, but when you add a layer of community connectivity, when you add a layer of connectivity with representation, when you add needs assessments and the availability to connect someone to resources or opportunities, all of a sudden that risk doesn't seem as big. And it also, for me, ties back to how I've used my law license my entire career, which is just how can we change the conversation from what a piece of paper says to the person in front of you, whether that person's applying for a job and an expungement removed or didn't remove a charge, or we're talking about someone's arraignment when they're first arrested and charges are brought, or the context you're talking about, people who are in pretrial detention and almost seemingly unnecessarily, because the safest or easiest thing to do is to isolate someone, to use COVID public health terms, quarantine them from the rest of society, and then try to figure it out.
I so wish we had more time to talk, but I do have one last question, because one of the things I've been in awe of, and I've been so fortunate to be a part of this growth and development of community strategic collaboration with not just the defender, but with the district attorney and with the courts. I've seen them grow more and more in their ability to express what they want from decision makers, because remember, we're all making decisions on behalf of community, which is a very paternalistic and maternalistic thing when we don't include their voices and understanding of what it is they need from us. And so I'm hoping that this movement grows even larger, because the people in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia's community has been amazing. I want to talk about one last thing, because I know community justice involves programs and practices that are focused on community level outcomes, and they address problem solving and restorative justice, which most of the times works better when you're really trying to move on and advance the people that were harmed so that they understand. You guys did something very bold and empowering this summer, and I'm glad that I was a part of that as well. But I will say the impetus was because we saw protests all across the world by every person in every ethnicity, and it was a reaction to years and years and years of unchecked and unaccounted for behavior by our government. So it's not like it just came out of nowhere, even though people talk about it in a vacuum. But what we saw when we saw the arrest that occurred in Philadelphia, there were, I can't even remember, some like over 600 arrests for activity related to protests. My office was really looking at the percentage of minorities who were arrested, and we saw a good 70% of the people that were arrested in Philadelphia were minorities and were charged with some serious offenses, who were first-time offenders. And knowing how damning that could be, the district attorney's office decided to engage community to do what we call restorative justice. Could you talk about that and talk about how that worked out based on what you know now, and what could have happened if you didn't do something like that?
Yeah, and I think it was a really difficult decision to charge and what to charge. And all I can speak to about that Sunday morning, where the first arrest actually came through, is just like the city was so unprepared for the sheer volume that no decision maker had enough information to make a good decision. But we have a timer, and someone's individual rights and liberties has a timer that we need to respect. So again, it was almost err on the side of we need to signal to everyone that while unaccountability from the government historically is really bad and not okay, we also can't necessarily have this large scale unaccountability for community behavior. So by charging people, we tried to signal to everyone, both law enforcement and the public, whether they were participants or not, supporters or not, that we were going to take a fair, even-handed approach and then try to figure it out with our other stakeholders. So coming up with the restorative justice proposal was really exciting because it was really a community-based proposal that was presented in part to us and to the public defenders for our buy-in to give it quote unquote government legitimacy. But the community legitimacy, to your point, I think was already there. And it was a really lot of moving parts as we tried to build it on the go. But when it was all said and done, we were able to successfully divert hundreds of people out of the criminal legal system while also being able to filter people who were opportunistically taking advantage of the chaos in a much more organized or dangerous manner, albeit post-arrest and post-charge community intervention. It does, I think, lay a roadmap of possibilities of how community can be involved in resolving conflict as a way to provide accountability that doesn't require a judge, doesn't require defense or the prosecutor to be there. It's just a restorative justice facilitator, harmed people, and people who are taking accountability. And I think that it'll be really interesting to see the long-term outcomes of that process. I do know a lot more people are trained for restorative justice facilitation, which is what a wonderful outcome to have from a moment in time.
Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for just your belief in community, your invitation of them to come into the systems process, and you're valuing their experience in their own neighborhoods and understanding how to resolve some of their own problems. I often say, you know, community has solutions that if we just listen, we'll understand that there are more alternatives than just the hammer and the nail. And we can also make sure that we're not unnecessarily tagging people with lifetime convictions that function like the Scarlet Letter A in Pennsylvania, because they're not easily able to escape those things. And as you always said, my friend, there are over 900 legislative acts that exclude people with criminal convictions from the qualities of life that they deserve. And so at some point, I hope we're able to look at that and see that long after someone has committed an offense or has created an action that we have deemed criminal, that we're still making them pay for that. And not only are they paying for that, society is paying for that. There's a lot of unleft or unfilled job opportunities by people who just can't fit them because they're legally excluded. So thank you for your vision. Thank you for your compulsory friendship. I say that all the time because you have some deniability, because I'm not going away, Mike. You are my friend. And I mean it. But you have been tremendous and over there at the district attorney's office. And I know they always say both sides need good people who have a balanced perspective. So thank you for your service, Mike, and keep doing what you're doing, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you for the words of encouragement, and thank you for everyone's patience as we try to continue to grow and evolve as the prosecuting office for Philadelphia. And to Rep. Rob's point, safety feels different for everyone. Some people, a gun feels safe. Some people, a gun is the opposite of safe. Some people, police car feels safe. Some people, it's the opposite. So even with our best intentions to provide that general safety, we'll always know that personal safety will remain a personal choice impacted by your environment and your decisions. But thank you for all your work here at addressing the underlying stigmas and prejudice around how we use our criminal legal system, and good luck to Uplift Solutions for the rest of your wonderful conference.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kier. Thank you, Mike. This was a phenomenal talk. I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but I got a tremendous amount out of this. Kier, thank you for leading this discussion. Mike, thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing as well within this space where it's just not about criminal justice, but it's about restorative justice. And so